Hello, Barbara. Hello, Ken.
Okay.
Ken, we've seen only half your head. That's better. Hey, Barbara.
All right, I'm going to start broadcasting so you can get participants into the room. Hey, Ken, do you have outdoor space or are you on vacation?
Outdoor space.
Cool.
It's one of the few redeeming features of my apartment.
Nice.
That was very nice.
Especially in the summer months when you can attend a meeting outdoors and have it still be light.
That's right. You'll see me go inside in about 8:30. Assuming we're here that long.
Oh, the optimist.
Yes.
Hello, Rich.
I'm going to put my name in chat.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Oh, I should.
Yes. Marcus, Jay, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Good.
If anybody's interested, today at LPC, in a marathon session, the museum, rather the New York Historical Society application was heard. There are a lot of questions from the commissioners and no decision was reached. So that'll be a work in progress for a while. The entire morning was taken up by a move to designate an individual home in Brooklyn that was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And incredible testimony, including recitation of underground passages that apparently are still there. And anyway, fascinating.
It was interesting. There's a building on 29th Street that was also part of the Underground Railroad. That was a very contentious issue with landmarks.
Does the Historical Society get kicked back to next month, Mark?
The way it usually works is that they encourage the applicant to work with the staff to consider the things that the commissioners expressed concerns about, and then it's on their schedule plus the commissioner's schedule as to when to reschedule. But it'll be at a public meeting, not a public hearing, so the record is closed and whatever they come back with is what they come back with.
So it doesn't come back to us.
Mark, I just have to interject. Andrew can't get into the meeting. He doesn't have the link.
I sent it to him twice.
Maybe third time will be the charm.
You know,
Yeah.
I had a lot of problems getting in also. I had to do it about 3 or 4 times before I got in, and then it let me in.
Howard, are you on the phone with him or texting with him?
I'm texting with him.
I sent him an alternative link, which is the one that's on the CB7 website. He should use that link, and then when he comes in, raise his hand and I'll put him back into the panel, okay? I thought I mentioned that to him, but if you can reiterate, that would be great.
You have his new Gmail address?
I do.
Okay.
All right, hang on, let me see if I can.
If there's a Google website.
Anybody hear the gunshots last night at 11 o'clock in the high 90s, or I mean, high 80s, low 90s?
What gunshots?
There were shots fired and casings left on the ground, and a window was blown out in a vacant storefront on 90th in Amsterdam.
Wow.
No one injured, thank God. And Deputy Commissioner John Miller happened to be there, and he's an old acquaintance, and we chatted about what's going on in the city. Perhaps better for another time or another committee.
Maybe we need a public safety committee. We never had to before.
That may be a good idea.
I was recently looking at 24th Precinct's Facebook page, and it's a good page to look at because they're constantly activity that's been happening very recently year on. So I think everyone should take a good look at the Facebook page. Very informative and up to date.
They mentioned yesterday's shooting.
Let me take a quick look right now, but I saw a bunch of other shootings like on 110th Street, 103rd, 99th and Broadway. There's a ton of activity lately, which is not good.
By the way, we did have a Uniform Services Committee. I was chair of it. And it faded over years. We used to meet with the precinct and other services on a regular basis.
Andrew Rosenthal points out that our meeting is scheduled for 7 p.m. on our website.
That's not correct. It's the calendar and the listing of committee agendas is correct at 6:30, but the description of committees is incorrect, and we'll have to update that.
Right.
Maybe we should get started. Andrew, I'm sure we'll be able to get in at some point, but why don't we get started?
I just sent him another link, so or
Okay.
fingers crossed.
We could just get started with the first agenda item, and he could join. And I'm sure I'll be joining in a couple of minutes. This is the July meeting. The CB7's Transportation Committee. Our new co-chair will be here very shortly. That is Andrew Alpert. And we'll just jump into our first agenda item, which is a joint agenda item with the BCI. It's just a discussion and an update on the restaurant street seating. This is a big change in New York City to have virtually almost all restaurants give the ability to put up seating on the sidewalk and in the street. And we just wanted to discuss how this is going and to see if there's any room for improvement. So why don't people on either committee give their comments on what they think on how this new program is progressing?
I can start with that. There is I mean, obviously not everybody's going to benefit from this, but those that are benefiting from it, for some of them it's working, it's not working so well for some others. And there was a snafu the very first week of the program where the guidelines that put up by the DOT to start with, they have said that you could have a planter, like something like a planter, 36 inches, 18 inches wide, 36 inches long, 36 inches high, 18 inches wide, up to about 4 feet apart on any street where there were more than 2 travel lanes. But then they said that on the streets that there were 2 or less travel lanes, they could have like any sort of barrier. A week into the program, they reversed themselves because that wasn't as safe as it should have been. And they changed the requirements so that you have to have 18-inch wide, 36 high, all throughout the space, no gaps, including also all streets. And a lot of vendors had created spaces for themselves, and they had to basically turn them down and start new. So for some of them, didn't work so well. Some others are taking advantage of it. And what I have noticed locally, I don't know anywhere else, but locally where there is a bike lane, only a few of the vendors are taking advantage of the street seating. Not all of them are.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would, if anybody wants to see what's possible with both in terms of seating and doing it in conjunction with the bike lane, I would go to Amsterdam between 87th and 88th in front of, I think it's the Mermaid Inn. I'm not exactly sure of the restaurant's name, but they have a platform seating for, I counted 50 diners, and the bike lane is between the curb and that seating. And they've put up a sign on a chalkboard that says, watch for bikes, which I think is maybe something that DOT could start handing out to, for instances like this. But in any case, I noticed that servers were looking both ways before they crossed, and seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah, I also like to add that just quickly, that many of the restaurants are pushing the boundaries of their spaces.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. The space that restaurants are given is very restrictive. It's just their basically frontage on the street. And I thought maybe we could also talk about whether restaurants should have some latitude to go beyond that. Again, this is an existential moment for most restaurants. There are estimates of 50% of restaurants closing. And I'm just raising the issue of how restrictive, oh, Andrew's finally joined.
Finally.
Yeah, how restrictive the city should be with regard to this. It may be a time to cut these businesses some slack to enable them to survive. Barbara had her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. We discussed this at some length in the BCI committee a few nights ago. And Josh Cohen isn't here tonight, but of course, you know, he's a bar and restaurant. And he felt extremely strongly, and I agree with him, that there is nothing more important than safety. And there are a number of restaurants that have crossed over the bike lane so that they've taken up the protected lane, what would normally be a protected lane. And in certain instances, it just makes for a very, very dangerous situation. The servers are going back and forth. They're going quickly. They don't really see the bikes that are coming. And it's just an absolute disaster waiting to occur. And nothing should be done about it. But we agreed very strongly that although DOT made some mistakes in the beginning, it was something that was already done, and we're moving forward now. And the best that we can hope for is to do something that's really safe, that will keep both diners and servers and bikers and car people, everybody safe. So that's really the bottom line.
Any specific recommendations come out of the BCI committee meeting, Barbara?
Somebody raised the issue of discontinuing the lane on Columbus and Amsterdam so that the restaurants could be able to set up appropriately, right, you know, both on the sidewalk and in that first curb. So there will be nothing that has any moving traffic, walk across, and that was about it.
Well, that was discussed, and I believe Mark raised a point that that was in the discussions prior to the program put into effect, and that it had no traction.
That's right. I have noticed a lot of.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We all took. I'm sorry. Who has the floor? I don't want to. All right, I'll just go real quick. We took a walk before this program opened up with Gail Brewer and Linda Rosenthal and Helen Rosenthal and Scott Stringer, and Mark was there, Barbara, Ken, and I'm sure I'm forgetting someone else. And that was one of the ideas that we had, was to temporarily move the bike lane where the floating parking lane is, get rid of the parking, and have the seating. But apparently, I guess Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, the DOT summarily rejected that based upon the fact that this is a short-term program and it would be way too much to restripe the.
That's what I heard too, and I heard it. You're correct. I heard it in that meeting, and I also heard it in a subsequent meeting. But there've been a lot of these meetings, so that's what I've got.
And do we have any estimate as to what percentage of additional seating per the 100% indoor a restaurant would have, the additional lane would provide to restaurants? Has anyone quantified that at all?
No, we haven't.
In
We haven't
some
done that.
instances, it's the difference between a restaurant having no space and having some space. So
Well, having no space, if you have part of the sidewalk and you have the lane adjacent to the bike lane.
Andrew, if there's a bus stop right there, or if there are other impediments, they're not permitted to set up there. There are guys.
Obviously, if there's a bus stop, you can't. Sure.
Yeah, but they could go to the north or south of it. That's.
It has been requested that to allow them to use like adjacent space to their storefronts, especially if there's a vacant place, and if either if it's another business and the landlord will allow it, they have talked about, that has been requested, but so far that hasn't been approved.
I have actually seen what you just said. I have seen
Well,
restaurants taking up the space of a non-restaurant store. Yeah.
As I said,
The best example is Carmine's and Old Big Daddy's.
as I said before, many restaurants are pushing the envelope.
But pushing the envelope, when you say the landlord's approval, there's the street space and there's a sidewalk space. The sidewalk space would require the landlord approval.
Right.
The street space would not.
No,
So
no, but
maybe we should
but
consider
we-
that.
but we have to be approved by DOTs. So far, there hasn't been. As far as I know, DOT hasn't. They haven't considered it seriously yet.
I've seen some where DOT has approved a wider curbside seating area than the storefront is wide. By the way,
Yes.
Peter Arnson's in the chat. You may want to call on him.
And on a positive note, unlike the process that we approve at BCI for enclosed and unenclosed cafe permits that go through the Department of Consumer Affairs, and there's a lengthy process, you need an architect and there's a filing. And this is a self-certification process. It is free, it is quick. And in spite of the fact that DOT did mess up, they did not issue any fines or anything. It was more of a, let's correct this. So I have to say is, they made some mistakes, but it's a pretty good deal at least to help mitigate some of the terrible losses that the restaurants are having. And this, I believe the program ends around Labor Day, if I'm not mistaken.
As it stands currently, yes.
I think the next issue that we'll face here is what happens when the colder weather comes along. Will restaurants be permitted to have heat lamps? How will they have those heat lamps? I know that
The
on
wires.
there is no electricity in the tree pits. Not true everywhere, but it certainly is true there. I don't think it's on Amsterdam either, but I'm not 100% certain. And and other issues like that.
Oh, well, first of all, the street portion of it is only through Labor Day right now, so that wouldn't be an issue as it stands. The use of the sidewalk, that's right now through October, so maybe at that point, you're right, that could be an issue.
So the fact that it's only through
So-
Labor Day in itself is a problem. That's only 6 weeks away.
I know.
Well, do you want to consider a resolution to ask for an extension of the time and a potential extension of the amount of street space restaurants could use as long as they're not interfering with other uses and it's safe?
Yeah, I would.
Yes to a resolution. What are all the things we'd want to include? I think
Well,
that's
there are two off the top of our heads. This should go on as long as where the restaurants are literally prohibited from having any indoor dining. And number two, to the extent it can be done safely and without interfering in anyone else's uses, to give them a little more space in the street than merely the space that matches their retail frontage.
Right. So if we do that, Howard and everybody, where would non-restaurant retail get their deliveries? If, for instance, some of this moved into the next retail space, would have to be further up the avenue, I assume. Has anybody experienced how deliveries are being made now?
That's a valid point, and maybe the resolutions would be worded if it interferes with any other retailer's ability to do their business, they don't get to do it. But to the extent they can expand their use of the street space without interfering with any other uses.
I support that. That's good.
So I'd worded very narrow, without interfering with any other uses, and that's pretty broad.
We could also
Maybe
ask for expanding loading zones as needed.
Maybe they need written approval from their next door neighbors who have retail establishments that it's okay to set up there.
Do we want to give veto authority to?
No.
I don't know that we do.
No. I think the way it's worded right now is proper. I think Susan wanted to talk.
I would also argue that we should not have we shouldn't be saying an end date. I think we should do this indefinitely until they're allowed to open indoors.
Until indoor dining resumes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think if If it gets too cold, they'll figure it out.
Yep.
So
Are
we're
we talking
proposed-
about, Howard, are we talking about the roadways and the sidewalks, or extending the sidewalks?
Well, my original idea was just the roadway itself. But I don't see why we couldn't extend this to the sidewalk. I think that the
My
point is,
point would be the opposite, that we extend
I'm proposing
the
both
ability
then.
to use the sidewalks and not the roadways.
well, I'm proposing both. Both are on the table then.
As long as you maintain walking space for people who need to get through. Yeah.
Right, and again, it would be worded so that as long as it doesn't interfere with any other uses. So in other words, people would have the ability to, neighbors would have the ability to object to it if there's a problem. I just
think
give a lot of latitude towards these businesses that are pretty much all struggling.
Well, that's what I mean. I think Rich raised the question, do we want to give veto power to the neighboring retail establishments? But they have their issues as well. So I don't think it's right to give these restaurants the ability to expand in front of another retail establishment without their consent.
No, well, there's a question of consent or to question it or to have it removed if they do it and it creates a problem. It's a question of, do you ask permission or do you ask forgiveness? And I think that if they have to ask for formal approval, they're not going to get it. I think there's a perfect protection in that if any neighbor complains that there's an interference with the use of their property by virtue of this expanded space for restaurants, they can have that taken away. I just think that the restaurants should be given as much latitude as possible. If there's a problem, it'll be prohibited. But I don't think you should start out by saying everything's prohibited unless you get explicit consent.
I agree. And restaurants obviously are the only ones where the public cannot go in now. All other retailers, basically you can. So restaurants have to be given this extra latitude.
Yeah.
Right, and let me be clear, if another retailer has a problem, the space is gone. Any neighbor that has a problem with the space can have it removed. The problem is you need the point is to give restaurants a bit more breathing room because they are unique in that they're essentially closed.
How would an adjacent retail establishment know that they can in fact object? Should we
I would
at least have for example, at least have the restaurant give notice that they have the right to object?
That's a good idea. I would say, yeah, they
Some
should.
kind of notice.
Yeah.
If I may interject, I don't see the city agreeing to that. I would say that for any extra sidewalk space, it will have to be approved by the proper stakeholder, whether it's the landlord, the tenant, or whatever. I also I believe Susan wanted to talk a little while ago. She hasn't been given a chance.
Yeah, there's two raised hands here that we should take. Susan and William Ortiz both have their hands up.
Thanks so much, guys. So my concern is for the restaurant workers who I think are really having a tough time. On lower Columbus, kind of where I live, using AG Kitchen / Harvest Kitchen is a great example. It's just absolutely perilous to watch the bikes ripping through the serving area. And I agree with Barbara that it's just a matter of time until there's really a serious problem. And I would suggest that we consider repurposing the bike lane. Now, I know that when you did the walk around, the discussion was about moving the bike lane over. And I know this is a controversial thing and no one's going to like this. I'm the voice of doom here, but I would suggest that since there's so much less car traffic, and since the bikes don't seem to be using the bike lane necessarily, that right now we consider repurposing the bike lane on Amsterdam and Columbus, and we give that over to the restaurants because the restaurants are really having a hard time. I think we all agree on that. And that would make it safer for the restaurant workers, make it safer for the diners, and the bikes aren't using that space anyway. And Lisa Orman, you're asking, how are you going to protect the cyclists then? Susan, well, I have to tell you, right now, I don't think that they're in peril because they're choosing not to ride in the bike lane, frankly. I'm out there every day a lot and they're not in the bike lane, so I don't think it's really a problem on a temporary basis to do that. We took a look at West End Avenue and we repurposed that to make it an open street. We've repurposed all sorts of other stuff. If somebody arrived from Mars right now and took a look at what we're doing, they would think that the only thing that really mattered in New York City right now was the bike lanes. And I just want to suggest politely that we reconsider this and give a temporary pause to the bike lanes. Although on Columbus Avenue, they just repainted them green this morning. So I don't know. That's my point. And I also want to concur with what Barbara said about, the, Lisa, whatever. I just want to say that October's here before you know it. And I'm not hopeful about there being an end to this. And I think we should start now the conversation about what to do about outdoor dining and helping the restaurants out when the weather gets colder, whether that's heat lamps or what it is, just something so that they don't all die. Lenwich closed. I cannot believe it. That's all I have to say. Thanks so much.
Well, Susan, you can't have it both ways. If they're not using the bike lanes, then there's no problem.
Well, if they're not using the bike lanes, why not give them to the restaurants?
They are using the bike lane, Susan.
They're not. I mean, it's just, the point is, you might want to give it over to the restaurants for now. It seems like a much safer thing. That it just seems like a recipe.
Didn't we already discuss this and dispense with it?
Okay, let's move on.
That's
Bill
not very
Ortiz.
polite, Ken. That's really not polite. We discussed a lot of stuff and gone
I'm
back.
just asking. I think we did.
It's not polite.
So
It's not clean.
Bill Ortiz.
I don't think we ever discussed it actually in this committee.
William Ortiz has had his hand raised for quite a while.
Yeah.
thank you. So I really like the discussion that we're having, and I'm open to all options that I'm hearing. I think it's really important that we stay and keep our businesses here. I want to even throw a curveball and have us think outside the box even more, if this is even possible. Having a remote dining area in Central Park. So in addition to whether it's on the curbside, in a parking spot, in a bike lane, if they want more seating, say, hey, actually just head on east to Central Park. You'll see a location, you'll have one of our servers serve you there too. Because I think we really need to think and—
That's a pretty long trip for a server from Amsterdam Avenue to Central Park. Don't you
Yeah,
think?
I would definitely agree with you, but I don't
People
know
talked about the distance across the bike lane to bring.
I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but there are some restaurants that when they reopened, I passionately went there, ordered food and delivered food and want to eat there often enough. And if all the seats are taken, I'll do takeout, but the experience of actually eating out again feels good. And I think even having a remote location, look, if we have people stationed in Central Park with even just 4 tables and people walking through Central Park, it's like, hey, Celeste is here in Central Park too, let me order. And then, they'll have a team of people that would deliver the food from Amsterdam to Central Park West. Yeah, it might be a little bit slower than normal, but I want to make sure we even consider all extreme options that will help our businesses get locations if they're not, fortunate enough to have, some businesses have, 4 or 5 tables versus others that have 10 or 12. And I want to just bring out that idea that maybe we can have remote locations for businesses that would need it. And I think a lot of us would want to help and support businesses that we're passionate about.
William, that idea, Rich, hold on. That idea has already been floated for public plazas and open plaza spaces, whereas we suggested that some restaurants could open a kiosk and have them in those spaces. So that can easily be extended to park areas also.
Yeah, well, I think the analog is like a smorgasbord or a food fair where they're actually serving and have a satellite kitchen. So it's, they're not cooking in their restaurant and bringing it a half mile away. They're able to have some kind of facility. And I think it's not just the park. There's also Lincoln Center. There's schoolyards. There are other open public spaces where this could happen.
There's an open space in Central Park right by Tavern on the Green that is totally unused. It is totally empty, and you can have food trucks there.
And people who would be walking along Central Park would be excited that they don't have to walk all the way to a different avenue to eat. And I think it'd be very helpful for the business to get extra revenue in a different location.
I think that's a good topic for a joint with the Parks Committee.
Yes, I would support that. This is Elizabeth. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Elizabeth.
So the resolution on the table is a very modest one. It's for the extension of the outdoor seating program as long as restaurants are effectively closed, and to give greater latitude to restaurants to use additional street and sidewalk space as long as they don't interfere with other businesses or people's uses.
Yeah, I
And
like
to
that.
give the city latitude to add loading zones as needed.
Could I be heard on that?
Oh, Mark, please.
Please.
Thank you. Just keeping in mind that a resolution adopted tonight gets voted on in September, which would obviously give very little time for anybody to consider what you're talking about. A lot of what you're talking about, not, I'm sorry to say, the redirection and or substitution of the bike lanes, but the creative use of outdoor spaces, whether it be, I'm not sure how I feel about Central Park, but our May, well, I guess it was adopted in June. Our June resolution calling for support for outdoor uses, outdoor spaces to be used for retail, including but not limited to restaurants, would have plenty of room in it to support a lot of what you're talking about here. Not the repurposing of the bike lanes, and maybe not Central Park, but outdoor plazas, POPs, those privately owned public spaces. All of that is already approved by the full board. So we could write a letter this week that addresses all of that without having to vote on something, in effect, to wait till September. If you wanted to do a resolution that expanded the scope of what we've already called for, which was awfully broad, then that would become a separate resolution. But anyway, so there is a path to a quicker result is what I'm offering.
Yeah,
That's a really good point, Mark.
Yeah, the letter will work.
I agree, Mark, also, but I think there is some utility to maybe having a resolution on deck now that we could deploy in September that would extend the time, because that wouldn't be too late.
I don't believe our resolution called for a time, and our resolution was adopted before Intro 1957, which is the one that introduced the idea of a time limit. Therefore, ours is evergreen.
So we could call for extending the time as long as possible in a letter.
I certainly think so, but I would defer to others who
I believe so.
Resolution.
Yeah.
Depending on the conditions, we could just resolve to extend the time. Correct?
We could just say on the letter, as up to the time that the indoor dining is again allowed.
Allowed, yes. Yeah, that would work.
You got a couple of hands raised here.
Yeah,
Albert,
Jay has his
I think Doug as well, and I also think you might want to call on Peter Arnson from the attendee.
I see Jay and Jessica Spiegel's hands up. Jay, you're on.
Yeah, well, I actually was going to comment on the idea of opening up Central Park and having kiosks and serving. I mean, I think it's beyond the pale, but since we're no longer focused on that and we're talking about a much more limited result, I'll save my comments and hope that they'll never become necessary.
That would be great. And if it's Central Park, it's beyond the veil.
That's right.
Jessica Spiegel, please. Jessica, you're unmuted.
She has to unmute.
Oh. Jessica, you need to unmute yourself.
You can tap on your screen and see the unmute symbol.
Yep, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Sorry. So I just want to call in today because I don't know how many of you maybe saw the opinion piece in the Times, I think last week. I was really inspired by the article talking about like taking over the streets, for more pedestrian uses and, how much it would speed up the bikes and everything. So I live on 95th, near West End. And, the open street program has been just a lifesaver, just being able to walk outside and feel like being able to have that space. And, I think the outdoor restaurants, has been just such an amazing program. And I'd love to be able to, I wanted to just call in and say, like how much we could maybe use this moment to like try to expand on that. And, because it just seems like there's so many cars just sitting on the street. They're just not doing anything all week long. And we could take that space back. And it would be great to try to do something with that right now when we have that moment. I think to one of the ideas earlier about dining on the street, like it wouldn't have to be like you have to walk all the way to Central Park, but maybe if you took over like 3 parking spaces near your restaurant, like you could just, like if your restaurant wasn't on a block, that you could, because I know there's unfortunately some restaurants where you don't have the space in front of you, but maybe you could take over the parking spaces would be an idea. And, I know the bike lanes are an issue, but if there's reduced traffic, why don't we just take over some of these driving lanes and make more bike lanes? I mean, I'm thinking about commuting by bike. I know a lot of people are. Bikes are selling out all over the place. And I just wanted to call in and, I know a lot of people are thinking about commuting by bike now, and it'd be a real shame to miss this opportunity. So it was really inspiring. And so I just wanted to call in and really support, these kinds of resolutions and, creative thinking like that. So that was all.
Thank you, Jessica. I think if both committees are okay with Mark writing a letter reminding the DOT that we have called for an open-ended ability for restaurants to have outdoor seating as long as they don't have indoor seating, and to give them the greatest latitude possible to have outdoor seating as long as it doesn't interfere with other uses. I think our old resolution is broad enough to justify that letter. And I just was wondering if that's a way to proceed that people are comfortable with.
I am comfortable with
I
it.
think that I really do think that we need to address the issue of the liability of the danger for the workers, the restaurants, and also the pedestrians with the bike lanes going through those restaurants. I really think we need to address that somehow. I don't think you can just brush it off.
I'm not brushing it off. It's just that not have the bikes, not have the bike lane, in my opinion, is significantly more dangerous.
Why don't we add some, if we're going to send a letter, as long as it's limited to an extension of what we've already
that's what we're
resolved
proposing
to support, I think it's fine. But why don't we add some language that in addition to the consideration of interfering with other usages, that it be done safely, in essence, that with the proper safety consideration.
That's a good
Some
point.
language to that.
That's a good point, that it be done
Actually,
so that there's no interference with other uses and in a safe fashion. That's a really good point. Mark, are you okay with this?
Safety for servers, cyclists, and
Yeah.
pedestrians.
Safety for everyone.
broad.
I don't want to leave anyone out.
Yeah.
Mark, are you okay with that approach?
I am. I only write letters that that reinforce actions that the board has already
It's
taken.
already taken.
Yeah.
And I think that's the right way to approach this. I do see Doug had his hand up. I'm not sure if it's about that scope or what.
No, I just for clarity, so we're talking about extending the current program and amending it. Is that right? There's two different things we're doing here. We're asking for the existing program to be extended beyond Labor Day and to expand beyond it, and for the DOT and all other powers that be to look more favorably and more liberally on for restaurants, right? Is that kind of what we're saying?
Not really.
And well, it's not really. Okay, so but we're dealing with 5 boroughs here, and I think over 7,000 restaurants have now applied. I'd be very interested to hear what Andrew Ridgie is working on and what other community boards are working on within Manhattan and throughout the 5 boroughs, because some board, we can't make a determination what is great for other neighborhoods, although I tend to think it's going to be generally supported to continue the program. But I have to imagine that this is afoot. There are thousands of restaurants that are thinking about what are they going to do the day after Labor Day. So I'd like to hear from other community boards and other people in the industry as to what they are already thinking or planning or requesting.
Doug, I think the language that Howard and others have suggested is, as long as there's no indoor dining, keep this program in place. That's basically.
Yeah,
And
I think
to
we,
take it
I
one
think
step
we can
further,
keep,
we're not legislators here.
Right.
It's just the city has certain discretion as to how much space to allow restaurants. And to the extent that the space could expand without any problem with safety, without any interference with someone else's uses, use that discretion liberally. That's all we're saying.
That's the gist
We're not
of it.
trying to come up with a new program. We're just trying to tell the city, give these restaurateurs a break.
I know it's a miraculous moment, but I actually agree with Howard.
A miraculous moment. So can we?
Yeah, I think as long as we keep it,
Oh, it's
it
not a question. It's a
general, and we're kind of reiterating our support, showing our consideration for other usages, showing our consideration for safety issues, and keep it general, I think it's fine.
Great. I'll work with Mark on the latter.
Yeah. I'd like to make one more point.
I support this, but it's very hard to believe that the mayor is not going to come up with this concept himself, the same way he has done with alternate side parking, that, wanted to see how it worked, and he's going to extend it month by month and see how it goes. But I'm happy to sign on to this.
I wanted to make one more point. I have heard comments where people are saying that there's not that much traffic. I have, from my personal observation, Columbus, Amsterdam, and Central Park West have just as much traffic right now as they did before March.
Traffic has definitely risen and risen on the bridges and tunnels as well. So
right. So any suggestion that says, well, there's not that much traffic, we can use the streets, that's not valid any longer. Now, I know the mayor has proposed to do more open streets, and within the open streets program, they are allowing the restaurants to set up on those open streets on weekend hours, Friday and weekend hours. So that's something.
Okay, I think we've addressed
more number 3 on the agenda, but I just want to respond to Christian that I think the issue of increased traffic is going to be a huge nightmare as more people start getting around, as the issue that I've raised a lot, and that's number 3 on the agenda, which is that unfortunately people are still going to be scared to take public transportation. And I think many more rides are going to happen in private cars. That's going to cause just a horrendous amount of gridlock. But that's number 3 in the agenda. So I'll wait for that.
But yeah, okay. Yeah, I have comments for that. We'll wait until then, yes.
We'll wait for number 3. So let's do number 2. Discussion of a crosstown bike lane on West 72nd Street. As everyone knows, there's I was about to say limited. There are actually no crosstown east-west bike lanes, protected east-to-west bike lanes on the Upper West Side. So let's discuss that. Andrew, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. This, of all the possible crosstown bike lanes, this one makes the absolute most sense. This is the one that connects to a cross through the park route to the east side and connects the bike lane that's at Riverside Park to the east side. And this one I would fully support. And I just want to talk about what alignment we're talking about for this lane, north side or south side.
Frankly, this came up from a variety of sources, and I'll just say something I say all the time. I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not an expert on street use. We're a community board, and if there's something we want, we pay high taxes so that there are experts who work for the city who can figure out how to integrate it into the existing streetscape in a safe and efficient way. So I really have no idea. Maybe there are people, maybe Ken has an idea on how this should be integrated in the street. What I do know is that there is a need for safety, for a safe crosstown passage. There's not one now. And how it should be integrated, again, people on the committee may know more than I, but I'm absolutely certain there are people who are funded by our tax dollars who know even more than us. So my thought at this point is that we want one and let the city come back to us with a plan that we could comment on. But if people have specific ideas.
No, I think that's a great idea. I can see advantages to both and disadvantages to the north and south side. So yes, let DOT check it out.
Yeah, I would just say none of us, I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't feel qualified to make that call. But to what Andrew said, I would just add that it's a very broad street that doesn't actually get a whole lot of traffic compared to other crosstown streets. And but ironically enough, it has a lot of double parking, so it's effectively a 2-lane street a lot of the day. And so if we get a bike lane that comes with loading zones, and which could really be used there.
I agree. This is anecdotal. I drive on that street all the time. I use it to go to the highway, and it is 1 lane in each direction. There are at least, I counted last time, there were 8 double parked cars on each, roughly 8 on each block. It's a really inefficient use of space. But let's hear from
There's also there's a lot of double parked trucks there that are unloading, and that seems to go on all day long. And it seems a good bet, although I would be in favor of a bike lane there. I think it's a dangerous, east-west corridor. But I don't know how you would deal with that, because I'm sure that there would be trucks parked in the bike lane all the time.
I don't know. Andrew Rosenthal has his hand up. You have to unmute yourself.
Person, but Hitoshi Igarashi, who did this job for him, did not. Okay, for the translating, yes. Communication 4, memo.
Someone mute the attendee who's on a cell phone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start over again. I have personally collected petitions from hundreds, if not 1,000 people in support of this 72nd Street bike lane. I agree with those that say, let's leave it up to DOT. I generally think that they know what they're doing and they do a good job. I just want to alert people that there are other out of the box things we haven't seen from DOT, like a 2-way lane down the middle. Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, DC has this. It works very successfully. I don't know if that's what they'll come up with or not, but I ride this all the time going from Central Park West to Riverside, and there is very little traffic now that the transverse is closed, now that there are not as many exit and entrances from the West Side Highway as there once were before Trump. So this just makes total sense. It's the most logical. It would connect Riverside Park and the Greenway and people that commute in from uptown to Central Park, and then let them distribute all the way through Midtown. So thank you for considering this, and I hope you vote yes.
Okay. Panelist William Ortiz. William?
Sorry. So I think having a bike lane through one of our big streets, whether 72nd, 86, 96, is a good idea to travel safely. I find myself never going on those streets. I'm usually in smaller street. I would say though, however, maybe if we write to DOT and possibly consider the idea of creating a bus lane / bike shared bus lane, bike lane, shared lane. Because I think one of the problems we see is that, and I know there aren't many crosstown buses specifically on 72nd, but I feel like a lot of the discussions we had that it's either one or the other. And I think if we, improve our crosstown bus services, so maybe not necessarily 72nd Street in this regards, if we want to have a bike lane, I think it should be shared to some capacity where our parking isn't removed, our streets get more congested, and there's a whole new set of traffic lights that people have to relearn, right? The independent islands that we have on Columbus and Amsterdam is tricky for some people. I don't know why, but I've seen them kind of, walk around looking scared crossing the street. So I think this is a good idea. I like the idea, but I think we could do a little bit more, maybe asking the DOT and exploring the idea of making a bike lane / bus lane as a protected lane so it's shared. and we can get what we want on both ends of the spectrum.
Thank you. Well, Christian, and then we'll go to non-committee members. So Christian, and then we have a couple of non-committee members.
I support the idea of having the bike lane. At this point, I cannot support an idea of having a shared bike lane and bus lane.
I don't think the DOT will go for that. Anyway.
And a bus lane on for the infrequent M72 is actually not necessary either.
That's from the experts' lips. Okay, Willow Stelzer, why don't I will unmute you, Willow.
Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. So I just wanted to speak in favor of this. I live on the Upper West Side at 90th and Central Park West, and I definitely want to be commuting to work. I'm going back to Manhattan soon. And this is the way I want to get to work. But right now, like, I actually don't have a fully protected commute to work. And that's the one thing that makes me nervous, because I work in Midtown East. So right now, like, after going through Central Park, I have to like kind of navigate all the Midtown traffic, which is a little bit of a nail biter. If I could go across 72nd, I could go down 2nd Avenue, which has a protected bike lane, and would feel much safer getting to work. And now that I have a little girl, I'm especially more conscientious about safe routes. So yeah, I would really love this. So I hope you vote in favor of it.
Thank you, Willow. Lisa Orman would like to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Muted. Yep.
Okay, thanks. I know it's no surprise to any of you that I'm in support of this. I also wanted to say to the previous speaker, Jessica, you are totally right. The vision in the New York Times was inspiring, and we've been working towards that for decades. We'd love you to join us at streetopia.city. As we emerge from these stay-at-home orders and re-engage in work, and eventually school, we hope, one thing is very clear to us, though the subways are the lifeblood of the city and we need to get back into them, people aren't comfortable yet, as Rich said, and biking is in the midst of a bike boom. We have added protected bike lanes on north-south corridors, but we have no safe ways to get across town. And we want to be able to bike to school with our kids and bike to work. We've collected tons of signatures, as Andrew said, and we've talked to our elected officials and sent letters to the DOT. I just want to say protected bike lanes, as many of you know, are really good for business because bikers actually shop. They increase safety for all road users and they are healthy. Bike lanes also save money, which is something that's super important right now. A study found that for every dollar invested in separated bike lanes, cities could save $24 on healthcare costs related to pollution and traffic. So that's great for us right now. I wanted to talk a little bit about just the bus bike combo plan that William proposed. I don't think that'll work. I think that's not safe for bikers. And I think there's tons of room on 72nd Street. So I think we can be very creative and we can ask the DOT to be as creative as they want to be. We could have a middle bi-directional lane, bike lane, and we could have bus lanes. We can have it all. It just is a matter of what we value. And I'm excited to hear you guys talk about this. So thank you. I hope you vote for it.
Thank you, Lisa. Rich Robbins has his hand raised.
Yeah, just a few quick points. I support it. I think it's a first step, but living on 103rd Street, I think we need more crosstown bike lanes. But I do support this. The one thing I do think we need to say is a protected lane, because if it's just paint, then it just creates a danger.
Yes, that was implicit.
Howard, that we should let DOT do their work and not make any greater suggestions.
Anyone else? I don't see any other hands raised. Oh, we have some non-committee members at the very bottom. Josh
Pinkerton and Reed Ruby.
Right.
Hey there, can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Great. Hey, wanted to call in tonight on behalf of my girlfriend, who is actually working call tonight over at Cornell. Since COVID started, she has commuted via bike. She has not felt safe taking public transportation, which is how she used to get to work. And unfortunately, she still feels unsafe biking to work. Every day she comes home and says about someone getting into the bike lane, making her feel unsafe. So unfortunately, she's making the best of a bad decision. But just wanted to say that other people have said this, we're in the middle of a biking boom. There's a lot of people who are doing this to get to work. She's one. I want to keep her safe, and wanted to add two other things related to that. On 72nd in particular, between Amsterdam and Columbus, if you walk down the sidewalk, there is tons of bike parking on the sidewalk. We know that all those restaurants there the last couple of months and even before that have been really dependent on delivery. That delivery gets delivered via bike messengers and guys on bikes. There are some people raising concerns earlier about restaurant worker safety. I think probably one of the biggest groups of restaurant workers are the delivery guys. Those bike lanes are absolutely crucial for their safety, for them to be able to do their jobs. So would echo, just the need that the bike, and we don't need just lanes, we need parking, we need everything. So if you could add some bike parking onto the crosstown bike lane as well, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Reed Ruby.
Thank you. I commute from Harlem down through Central Park. I turn right on 72nd Street to get over to the Greenway. And I would say that that's really a mainstay for anybody coming from uptown to go to downtown. That is a preferred route for a lot of people. Why? Well, because you're not on the streets that much, except on 72nd Street. So I agree with all the comments. It's a great place to put it in. There's a lot of room. There's not a lot of traffic, and it would make for a very safe route from uptown to downtown. I urge 72nd Street be a crosstown bike lane. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised. Andrew or Mark, do you have anything to add?
I'd just like to be heard.
Yeah, please.
I'd like to be heard on the suggestion. I would favor a traditional protected bike lane on 72nd Street with my usual mantra about loading zones to prevent double parking. With respect to that, the idea about additional bike parking, I think that's a good long-term goal, but bike parking facilities could actually interfere with the ability of restaurants to use curbside space and the sidewalk space for dining. And I continue to wish that it was not just limited to restaurants, by the way. So I would be a little careful about that in the near term. I think that's a longer term goal. There was a suggestion about a center lane bike lane. And my concern there is that it would be hard to protect that. And to the extent that we have bike lanes, they should be protected. That's my 2 cents.
We have Elizabeth's hands raised, but I just wanted to interject something. The resolution on the table is really just calling on the city to come up with a plan that we will then comment on. These are interesting ideas for different ways of doing it, but in my humble opinion, I would like to hear from the experts on what they think is the best way. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Just a quick question. So just to be clear on the geography, what we're proposing here for 72nd, this would go from basically River to the park. Yes. And then pick up in the park. So I'm fully supportive of this. I guess my only question is whether we need to get Parks Committee input. I don't think that we do, but because the bike lane actually goes, is already there in the park to begin with.
Yeah.
But
it's the roadway in the park, actually.
Yeah, this resolution is simply calling from Central Park West to the Hudson
Riverside.
Hudson River, okay.
It only addresses that area.
Okay, fully support then, thanks.
Why don't we call the question then? All those on the Transportation Committee in favor?
Is there something written? What exact language are we voting on?
Yeah, it just reads as a discussion, so I don't know if we received any.
We're calling on the city to come up with a plan for a two-way protected bike lane between Central Park West and the Hudson River. and they'll come back to us with a plan that we will then discuss.
On 72nd Street.
On 72nd Street.
Not to nitpick, but I don't want to say two-way because that makes it sound like one contiguous two-way lane when it might be two protected lanes, one on each side.
Okay, we will wordsmith it to make it clear. It doesn't have to be.
And add the word west 72nd Street.
West 72nd, absolutely. New York City, absolutely. We'll go in there as well. All those in favor, raise your hands. I've never done this before. 1, 2, 3. Andrew, can you count as well? And we'll see if we get the same number.
I'm not seeing the hands. Are you seeing them?
I see 6 hands, and then mine's up, and anyone else who can't vote by raising the. Oh,
Mine is up.
Andrew and Ken have both raised their hands.
I'm doing it digitally, but I'll put my hand here.
So I've got 8 plus 2 is 10. I'm sorry,
Thank
3
you,
is
Mark.
11.
You've come to the rescue.
I just
I
raised
got-
mine virtually.
Yeah, so I've got 8 virtual and 3 physical for a total of 11.
Okay, anyone opposed or abstaining on the committee? I guess not. Now we'll have non-committee members vote. Mark, if you could do this as well.
Howard, you said opposed and abstained in the same breath.
But all the committee members have already voted, okay?
No, I didn't vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say.
You said you said anyone opposing or abstaining.
I made a mistake, Jay. Anyone
Okay,
opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, you're abstaining. Okay, I'm very sorry about that.
No problem.
So I've got 11-0-1-0.
I told you I'm not good at this.
11-0-1-0 for the committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now we'll do the non-committee board.
All those in favor?
Actually, wait a minute. Oh, no. Okay, that's right. Non-committee board. Go ahead.
All those in favor? We
if
have
you-
Christian, Seema Reddy, Mark. Anyone else?
Shelley,
Shelley?
Shelley, where are you? Are you yes?
I was here, yeah.
I don't see. I'm sorry. It's probably me. Oh, there you are. Okay. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Okay. Hands down.
Anyone opposed?
Yeah.
Paul Fisher is voting yes. I don't know if you've seen him.
Is Paul a member of the committee? No.
No, he's a non-committee board member.
So that's 5. 5 in favor. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining?
Easier than I.
Looks like 5-0-0-0.
Exclamation point.
Great.
There's a message from Ellen Azarin. Who
I'm
both-
opposing. Opposing.
I'm sorry. Okay. 5-1-0-0. Is that what we have? Help me, guys.
I think so.
Yes, I think so.
5-1-0-0. Is there anybody who hasn't voted yet?
We had 11-0-1 for the committee and 5-1-0 for the non-committee. So if you don't feel you are counted, speak now.
Yep.
Howard
Okay.
and Andrew, there's a participant, Ellen Azarin, who seems eager to make a comment. She's written both in Q&A and in chat. And I think she had done
Yeah, I
that.
didn't see her hand raised. Okay, Ellen, go ahead. We've already voted, I note, but Ellen, I just unmuted you.
Thank you, Howard. And it's not a vote, but a comment that if we're talking about 72nd Street from Central Park West to the river, when you get to Riverside Drive to the river, it's a whole different ball of wax. It's not 72nd Street anymore. You have to get through Riverside Park, into that tunnel, down that ramp, make that sharp hair turn to get onto the Greenway. So if you're talking to the river, what do you mean exactly?
That's a very good question. And I think the intent, again, is to have this protected bike lane link up with the trail along the Hudson River. Again, I hate to say this again, but I'm not an expert on this, and I think the city needs to figure out how that could be done. And so I don't have an answer to your question.
If
So
I
I would
could-
really would just like somehow to incorporate in the proposal, point out to the DOT, because they don't always think of these things.
And it
that
needs
once-
to connect to the trail. That's a
That,
very
that
good.
once you get to Riverside Drive, it's a different story. You're not on the street anymore.
If I could jump in here real quick, because I think this is
Sure, Mark.
actually a parks issue once we get into the park, because that's how you get to the Greenway.
Yes.
And one of the things that I wanted to point out to the constituent who joined us, and thank you for joining us, is that phase 5 of the construction of Riverside Park South includes a dedicated bike lane separate from a pedestrian path that will lead you to the Greenway. So please God, they'll ever finish building the park, that it'll be there.
That's right, Mark. And so conceivably, this lane could end at Riverside Drive, or it could go to Riverside Boulevard and
It'll go to
connect with
Riverside
what you're
Boulevard.
talking about.
Yep.
So, well, I think we should leave it up to DOT to make that call.
And we should also point out to DOT, not that they're not aware of this, but at certain times of the year, and I'm guessing Ramadan is one of them, the north side of Kalari will certainly reaffirm this, the north side of 72nd Street has an inordinate number of double parked taxis attending the mosque. So, you know, if you don't want the bike lane blocked all those times of year, we must point this out to DOT.
Enforcement. Okay, does someone else have a comment?
Yeah, I have a few comments. One is, I don't think we should just say enforcement. I think there's a community of people who use the mosque and need a place to leave their cars. So that is something we should consider. It's not on the agenda for tonight. Right. I think it's not just an issue of enforcement, it's a means of accommodating them.
It's another issue.
The second is, I think this resolution should not say to the river, because that gets into parks jurisdiction. And there is a question, I believe that bikes are allowed in Riverside Park past the Eleanor Roosevelt Memorial and into the park at that point. So I think once you get to 72nd between Riverside Drive and Riverside Boulevard, there is a way for bikes to get into the park, I believe.
There are two different ways, possible ways.
Yeah,
And one is through the rotunda. Again, I don't think it's helpful to get into the micro engineering of this path. I think it's clear what we're calling for. If what they come back with is inadequate, we certainly can go back to them. Again, I don't think it's very useful to get into the micro engineering of this path.
You know, I'm just saying it shouldn't be to the river, it should be to the park. And that way we're not getting into the jurisdictional issues with the Parks Committee.
We'll come up with the wording and we'll give you a chance to take a look at it, Rich. Your comments are definitely helpful. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 3. This is really Andrew's bailiwick, so I'll let Andrew take it from here.
Sure. As far as people feeling comfortable about getting back on mass transit, they are responding with their feet and hopefully their fares. Ridership is up considerably from a month ago, from 2 weeks ago even. I've been riding quite a bit, and I've spoken to some other board members and committee members who have been riding. We've never seen the trains cleaner. Every surface is shiny and spotless. Fortunately, a lot of the unfortunate homeless population have taken up some help and some services, hopefully some housing as well, because there are fewer of them. But the MTA is undergoing quite a few strategies to get people to feel comfortable. They've just signed an agreement for 9,000, get this, I don't know where they're getting the money for this, because funding is a real problem. I'll talk about that in a minute. 9,000 new screens that will give you every kind of information. The crowding level as you approach a station. These screens will be powered by a new digital company called Mercury, which will allow them to actually target lines, stations, and individual platforms if something is wrong, to tell you about an update on the service, about how crowded your upcoming train will be, if there's any kind of problems, sick passenger, police action, whatever. They're doing all of these things to make people feel comfortable. Somebody just said something, I believe.
I think
Oh.
someone just had their phone, their
Somebody
speaker
was
unmuted.
muted. Sure. So the issue of wearing masks is now on the front of every bus. It is on the digital screens on some subway stations, not all of them yet, but it is coming as soon as you go down the steps. There is signage advising you to wear masks. They are actually handing out some at booths. They now have PPE machines on many platforms, as well as throughout Long Island Railroad and Metro North as well. They just announced some new places. So the MTA is doing everything they can to make people feel safe when riding again. I have been riding, as I said, 99%, I would say, are wearing masks. Over 99% are social distancing, unless it's a couple and they're hugging each other. But I think there will probably be an advertising campaign to get people back. We really need people to get back on the system so that we are not, overspread with cars and scooters and all of that. I have noticed a lot of additional Revel scooters all throughout the city now. It's a little different than what they told us when they presented to us where they were going to be, but they're everywhere, it appears. Many without people wearing helmets, which is a problem. But we really need to get people back on the system. And there is a bill now moving through various cities, because we are not the only transit property that has suffered unbelievable financial damage from COVID. Major cities like Boston, Washington, Philadelphia, Chicago, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Miami, LA, all of these are now signing on to a letter to get an additional $32 to $36 billion in the next COVID-19 relief plan. Without that, the MTA is presenting, unfortunately, I'll find out in about a week, some very unpopular scenarios that could take place if they don't get this funding. They believe they'll be okay for 2020, but 2021, there is a huge budget gap, the likes of which have never been seen in New York. And the service cuts of 2010 would pale compared to what could be happening, including the abandonment of entire lines. So we need to get people riding again. We need to get them comfortable, and we need them to contact their elected officials and make sure they support a federal bailout, because we will be in very deep doo-doo if we don't. So, there are screens coming. There are screens in place telling people approximate time of next trains, loading of particular lines, loading of stations is coming right on the front of the station. So I believe they're doing everything they possibly can. But obviously, it isn't everything, and some people will take their time. Fortunately, after the New York Stock Exchange told its returning employees not to use the transit system, they have changed their mind and said it's fine, it's okay. We need employers to encourage this. And I'll stop there.
Andrew, you're taking a few questions?
Sure.
Yeah, Andrew, why don't you call on the people?
Sure. I see, well, that was Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, go ahead. And then I see Rich and Jerry Cordova, and then a public member with their hand raised.
Sure. I just want to go back to what we have been talking about for several months now during the pandemic about the importance of mass transit. And I think everything you said tonight was spot on. I continue to believe that this committee really needs to prioritize getting mass transit back in shape. And I think the resolutions we've passed have been really laudable, but we need to keep pushing. And I hope that we can continue to do that in the weeks ahead. I don't know if there are any updates to the things that we've passed in recent weeks or months, Andrew. And then secondly, just a point about Revel. I was probably the person who was the Debbie Downer naysayer, asking tough questions of Revel back in when they came to our meeting, and they said they were coming to do first responders, and again, very laudable what they had said they were going to do. I would just caution and ask members of this committee that there are going to be a lot more of these new technologies. It may be a drone that comes, a drone company that comes to us the next time, something else. We cannot just sit back and not hold these companies accountable. we do not know. I think many of you saw in the New York Post, it was either Post or the Times this week, the emergency room visits because of accidents and crashes of these scooters, people getting injured, people coming in for not abiding by the rules. And I think we as a board did not really do a good job of setting those parameters for them if we were going to approve them. And I know they didn't come to us asking for a resolution. It was good to hear from them. They were sanctioned by the city, so it's really not, the community. But I just think there's a role for us when these new technologies come before us to really present what we think are going to be concerns. Now that Revel is out of the gate, there's not a whole lot that we can do. And I think it's, in some cases, people are using them really responsibly. In other cases, Andrew, to your point, people are going without helmets, people are going in the bike lanes. We don't even know what the rules are for them yet. And I would just say it's a cautionary tale for this committee, for us going forward, because these new technologies are going to come fast and furious, especially, post-pandemic. So hope that we can continue to shine a light on it. That's it.
Thanks for that, Elizabeth. Totally agree. I think Rich was next.
Yeah, I was the one who proposed having this item on the agenda. And I think, Andrew, what you said was obviously critical. And New York City can't function without people getting back on public transportation. But for me, that's one of three parts of this. And I think as a committee, we need to do everything we possibly can to get people back on public transportation. At the same time, we're seeing a lot more people are buying cars, a lot more people are buying bikes, and a significant part of the population is saying that they will not ride on public transportation, at least in the short term. And again, we need to change that. We need to get people to feel comfortable being on the subway and on buses, but we also can't put our head in the sand. And I think we need to do a resolution tonight on calling on DOT to think about what the implications are that so many more rides are going to be happening either in individual cars or in bikes or other forms of transportation. And the city needs to be addressing that because there are things that need to happen so that there aren't that many more conflicts among motor vehicles, bikes, and pedestrians. And as all three of them are getting more use and fewer people are taking the subway, things need to happen short term to do that. And then the third part of it is what the, I'm forgetting her name, the caller before mentioned about the Times article, that the city needs a vision for what the city should look like. I think the Times article did a great job of planting one vision, but we should be calling for that. We should be calling for DOT to think about what should the city look like in a few years. And that's another key part of where we are with transportation. And just to say, we want everyone to go back to the subway. Obviously we do, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I think we should discuss what should be in a resolution, but I think we should have a resolution saying that the city needs to be taking actions, both short-term and long-term, to address the impacts of the pandemic and what it means short-term for transportation and what it can mean long-term.
Rich, to your point, one of your points anyway, we should recommend, possibly this might be in a reso or a letter to DOT, that on all of their electronic signage, they say, please use mass transit whenever possible. It's ready, it's open and ready to serve you. Words to that effect, or it's safe to go back. Just words to that effect. And they have a lot of billboards all over the city. That could be a good message. And I think we should
the MTA doesn't need anybody's permission to put up that kind of signage. So are they doing it? Are they planning to?
They haven't done it on station entrances or on electronic signs. They just say, you must wear a mask. And
no, but you're talking about a different, not wear a mask, etc., but basically a PR effort.
Yes, I'm going to recommend
people to get back on mass transit and extolling the safety and cleanliness and etc. So they don't need anyone's support or permission. So they should do it.
They should do it, but I was also referring to DOT because they have, thousands of electronic signs all over.
Why don't we go down the list of people with raised hands? I think it goes, well, it's not alphabetical. Christian Cordova, then Ken, then Barbara, then Doug. Christian.
Okay. One question, Andrew. One of the concerns with using the subway is like the same concern of like dining inside the restaurant, the air filtration, because especially as ridership grows, there will be even less space and less space available on subway cars. So, a lot of people are going to be concerned with like whether they're going to get transmission through the air. That's one question. In the short term, this is a comment now. In the short term, I don't think we're going to see necessarily a high increase in auto use, because many of the companies that have a lot of employees in buildings, they're most likely going to be working remotely, just because it would take them all day just to bring the employees to the floor. It's just they have a physical barrier right there.
I'm glad you brought up that, because I should have mentioned there are 4 new technologies that the MTA is testing out that have been tested in Asia and Europe as well. One is obviously ultraviolet light, which does kill COVID and other germs. It's being tested in non-occupied cars overnight now. They're also testing these new antimicrobials, which will keep surfaces free of any germs for up to 90 days. And here's the really exciting one. They're testing real-time air filtering. There is a kind of filter that kills COVID and any other kind of viruses that are in the air. If successful, this could actually be incorporated into heating and air conditioning systems. And I know they're testing this all around the world. This would be a game changer if successful. So they are definitely looking into these kinds of technologies. And I might be able to have somebody come to a future meeting and speak about them if people, or come virtually and speak about them, obviously.
Ken?
Andrew, would that work as well as the air conditioning systems now?
Yes. Oh, well, no, the air
That's a
conditioning
joke.
system, they work pretty well. I was on a very cold train the other day.
On the newer cars, I'm not sure about the ones on the C line.
Yeah, the C has been relegated back to R46 cars because as you know, the R179s are all out of service due to various problems. But hopefully, I'm told that those could be back fairly soon.
Yeah. Well, anyway, just on Christian's point, I mean, we are sort of bumping up against the ceiling here, where if we get what we want and we're back to the levels that we had, when cars are as crowded as they were at 10 o'clock at night on the IRT, where social distancing is out the window.
It's not possible.
And it's so it's I would like to. I'm very intrigued by Rich's proposal for a resolution. I think at least in the long short term, we're going to be looking at a balancing act in terms of revivifying mass transit, but also doing more creative things on our streets. And I think the city is going to be faced with how to allocate space. Is it going to be for increased car usage, or is it going to be for alternatives to the car? And that's going to be a public policy question. And I would like to see us come down on the right side of that.
And if you want to see the streets used for things other than cars, for instance, which I pretty much, from having known you for years, knows that's on your plate, you better get mass transit back up and operating to its normal capacity. That's the key to doing any of that.
Well, there are other keys also that we've discussed.
Yep.
Barbara is next. You have to unmute yourself, Barbara. Barbara, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry about that. Sorry.
Okay.
I feel strongly that any resolution that has to do with the MTA to be helpful to them should not be linked with anything else. I think it's important enough that it should absolutely stand on its own. So that's that. And the other thing I wanted to just mention was that I had said Howard, and to you, Andrew, an email several days ago about putting Revel on the agenda. There's so many issues going on with Revel right now, and they're not getting better. They're getting a lot worse. And I hope that we can put that on for next month. Or
Yes, and hopefully we can get their representative back to talk to us.
Yes, good.
Doug?
Hi. Yeah, so I assume that even though our agenda item talks about subways, we're also including buses in this discussion. So I've been, for my own personal business, I've been taking a lot of buses, some trains, city bikes, and I signed up for Revel because I wanted to see what it was like and understand it fully. And I have to say it was a lot of fun. I think it was also, it felt quite dangerous. And I would also like to have that on an agenda. I am seeing awful behavior. I have seen gangs of revels, and I say gangs meaning like a 8-10 revels that are in Riverside Park. I thought the technology cut off, and maybe I'm confusing that with a different company where there's a zone where you can use a revel and you cannot. You can't go below 65th Street. You cannot go through Central Park. So lots of people that are doubling up. You're not supposed to double up on the bike. You have to wear a helmet. People are not wearing helmets, going through red lights. So this is a huge problem. The other, and again, this would be something we can have on an agenda item later. Motorcycles, I have to imagine that since everybody lives in the Upper West Side, we have seen this, again, I'm going to refer to gangs of motorcycles that go up and down Columbus Avenue, Amsterdam Avenue, Broadway, doing wheelies, going through red lights. I happened to be speaking to a lieutenant of the 20th precinct on Broadway and 78th when this gang came down, and we had a discussion, and he said, we're not allowed to do anything about it. And he literally waved to them and said, hi, fellas. So this is something that ultimately I understand is extremely dangerous. The police are not allowed to pursue. And in some cases, they've gone through their social media to try to find their meetups. But this is dangerous, and it's happening every night. Is anyone else seeing this? Can't be the only one. So anyway,
yeah, I seen it in Central Park West also.
It's happening every night.
I've seen gangs of revels for sure.
Rebels as well.
Me too.
And then the only, just going back to the actual agenda item that we're on tonight is, so buses, I'm taking the 7, the 11, the 104, the M57 frequently. I hear data about how bus ridership is going up. I don't know how they're tracking that since nobody is swiping. So I don't know if that's just asking a bus driver, hey, how many passengers did you have today? But I have noticed that as the ridership does increase, because it has been my observation, particularly in the 104, it's now, in my opinion, unsafe. Today, I got onto a 104, I rode one stop, I got off because there was no way to social distance and it was crowded again. I don't know how we prevent that. I don't know if there's a limit. You know, we have capacity in restaurants. Can we have a bus capacity? I know that's, you know, and when people are not wearing masks on buses, which I do see, the bus drivers are safely tucked in the front for their safety, but there really is no way to communicate with the driver, and passengers shouldn't be having conflict, although some people will say, put your mask on, but I don't.
Doug, I can answer some of those things.
Please.
They have found, and they will be installing these new protective shields for drivers in August. When they do that, there will no longer be the chain across, and everybody will board once again through the front door, unless it's a, you know, an SBS, and until Omni is totally here, which will be the end of the year when there will be all door boarding. But you will then be able to communicate with a bus driver through this shield and ask a question. It will also free up a decent amount of space. All the seats that are cordoned off now will be available for riders, so there will be greater social distancing. Ultimately, the answer is to run more buses. That's how you get more social distancing and get more people comfortable using the subway. Most people, the buses have come back in ridership to a much quicker degree than the subways, because people just feel safer because they're above ground. They're not necessarily safer. They just have this feeling that they're safer. However, you're actually on public transportation longer when you're on a bus, most likely, than if you were taking it instead of a subway. So They have to do a bunch of things, but starting in August, those front seats on buses will once again be available, and you'll board through the front door.
And real quick, I know we talked about this before, maybe offline or on our meeting. I am very happy to see that the front of the buses now say, wear your mask. And there is a recorded announcement on the bus, and that's great.
And there will, when I believe I read or heard somewhere that come August, when the operators are, when you're boarding through the front, the bus operator will, if somebody's coming in without a mask, will say, I'm sorry, you must have a mask, and turn them away.
Thank you.
I just want to interject. The agenda item was the subways, and we were talking a lot about Revel, about other electronic vehicles. We were talking a lot about buses. It's all great. I'm just pointing that out. I'm not.
Yeah, it's funny.
Critical. Bill Ortiz, do you have your hand up, or it's still up from last time?
I have my hand up. I just wanted to talk about my experiences. To put a smile to Andrew's face, I've been taking the train for the past month now. And the first time was a bit nerve-wracking about a month ago. But overall, I've had a very good experience going in different hours, early in the morning, evening, afternoon, and late at night. So I think in looking at our agenda item of discussing ways to address community concerns, I think really has to come from the top down. So maybe we have a resolution or write a letter stating that our mayor or our governor to do a public statement more frequently and discussing the advancements and changes to keeping the public safe through mass transit. So I think that's one way we can work towards getting something done tonight. But I also had a question for Andrew. Would it be possible for the MTA to create a type of reserved riding, a reserve ride? For example, let's say come September, where most people have to go back to work, there can be trains that go directly from, say, 96th Street to 50th or 96 to Wall Street. And then that train literally goes back to the same spot to run to highly popular spots. And it's reserved riding so that you can say, hey, we know we can fit 15 people, 30 people per car. I don't know what that will look like, but I'm trying to think of ways that we can guarantee social distancing and giving riders another way of riding. If like to Doug's point, he hop off a train. There was one point where I moved to a different car, but it wasn't that big of a deal. But I know there's a lot of people who are very sensitive to social distancing of 6 feet, masks that are just up to the nose. And it is very difficult to tell a stranger to put their mask up because you never know what can happen. So I just wonder if there's anything like that that's on the table or new creative ways of giving up.
Reserved was brought up, and that's not feasible on the subway. And there's many places where you would think you would like to turn a train around, but it cannot be turned around. There's no way to do that without tying up the entire line or installing a new switch in places and what have you. But they are working on an app that everybody can have on their phones that will tell you how crowded the trains are and how crowded each car is. The Long Island Railroad already has this on their train time. You can now see in advance or as you're waiting for a train, how crowded each car is by car number. That's how sophisticated it is. It's done by weight. The subway system can't do that, but it's working on something like that. But I think your suggestion of having the top down speak up favorably about getting back on mass transit is a great idea, and I'm going to suggest it.
We have some non-committee members who'd like to speak. Ellen would like to speak again. Go ahead, Ellen.
I think I forgot what it was about, but I think I was suggesting that because I had an experience on the subway where most people are wearing masks, but it's just the people who aren't wearing masks that you're afraid to say anything to. I tried a couple of times saying politely, would you please wear a mask? And, I had one experience where some big burly guy looked straight at me and said, no. And that was the end of that. So I very much agree and applaud the idea of having the MTA encourage and in fact say you won't be allowed in the subway without a mask. But there has I hate to use the word enforcement, but if somebody doesn't do it, what's going to happen if there's no penalty? So I had the idea of maybe a penalty for not wearing a mask, like a traffic ticket, just the way Cuomo is requiring people who get off airplanes now to fill out a form. And if they don't, there's a $2,000 fine. I don't know what the answer is, but something should happen to somebody who doesn't wear a mask, and it shouldn't be me, little me, sitting across from them.
No, what they're testing out at various crowded and well-used stations are something called platform controllers, who, when the doors open, will look in, and if somebody is not wearing a mask, will tell them to leave the train. So there will be, it's not at every state, not all 472 stations, obviously, but there will be police officers and platform controllers trying to convince people to wear masks. And it's really a disservice, not only to themselves, but to their friends and their families for them not to be wearing masks, because they may feel they're invincible, but that doesn't mean they can't pass it on to someone else.
Well, yes, Andrew, of course, yes, that's the problem with masks altogether. I'm just saying that enforcement, having platform controllers, people have to really feel that there's a good chance of getting caught and something happening to them if they get caught. Otherwise, having here and there,
I agree with you, Ellen. That's an excellent point. I don't know if they're going to test the in-car cameras out to see who may or may not be wearing masks and send people to meet that train. I will inquire about that when I have a briefing next week.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Jessica, is your hand up? Jessica Spiegel?
Hi. Yes. Sorry. I guess I probably made my comment too early before in the restaurant section. I didn't read the agenda closely. I apologize about that. Anyways, I heard somebody bring up earlier an idea of like requesting from DOT a vision or something, and that sounded really great. A comment that I definitely know I feel like the time is coming very soon, unfortunately, where I need to go back to my office. I will no longer be able to work from home, and buses do seem very like the safer option to me. I think one of the drawbacks, unfortunately, is that buses are slow, and it's because of traffic. And they say like 14th Street now, buses are a lot faster because they have protected bus lanes. I think a lot of this all goes hand in hand of this vision that, that unfortunately I know that's why I called in. Unfortunately, I apologize, but it's, it'd be great if buses could move faster, and it's why people like, in times like this, maybe people want to ride the bus, and it'd be great to do that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's still on the table to request of DOT. I think we've seen in the past that I know that obviously money is not going to be, there's not going to be a lot of money right now, but, I think under past administrations, we saw that a lot can be done with just paint, so it doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot. So I just wanted to call in.
I respond to that. One of the things that this committee has done and the full board has passed, and we haven't followed up on, and I will get the list. I'm sure I have it, but I can ask Penny or John for the list. We have suggested something like 12 to 15 locations on the Upper West Side where transit signal prioritization should be installed in the traffic lights so that buses can get an advanced start and proceed through red signals and get on their way faster. I don't believe DOT has done any of the ones we have suggested, but I will certainly look into that. That's another way to speed up buses.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
We have two committee members who had their hands up, so I apologize for not calling on them. Ken and then Rich.
Yeah, just to get back to Revel for a second, as long as it's going to be on the agenda for September, and as long as we're talking about our concerns about current technologies, current transportation alternatives on our streets, this is something I've wanted to bring up for a long time, which is I would like us to discuss the SUV, which is very, very dangerous, much more dangerous than a normal automobile for pedestrians and cyclists, and also much more polluting. I don't know whether people know this statistic, but each year, 3,000 people in New York City die a premature death because of air pollution. And much of that air pollution comes from motor vehicles. And a lot of that is caused by SUVs. So I think compared to something like Revel, SUVs are a much more problematic proposition on our streets, and we should be discussing what we can do about them.
Something for September. Rich?
Yeah, I want to get back to what I was saying before, and especially if we're talking about people looking for social distancing on the subway, that obviously is not in any way possible if subway ridership returns anywhere near to what it had been before the pandemic. And for that reason, I think we need to be thinking about what the impacts are otherwise. And I want to get back to the idea of having a resolution tonight, and open to other ideas. But I think in my mind, short term, it's number one, creating increased temporary bus lanes, just in case people might take buses who are not comfortable on the subway. Obviously, buses are still public transportation. Still hard to guarantee social distancing, but it's another option. And then the other is increased bike lanes. As we see, a huge number of people are looking at biking instead of taking public transportation. Even my daughter's middle school said that they're looking at putting bike racks so that middle school students can be riding to middle school so that they don't have to take public transportation. It's a fact that more people are going to be taking alternatives to public transportation. We don't like it, but it's happening, and it will continue to happen as more people need to get around the city. And I'm not seeing DOT being as proactive as they need to be to address this. And I think we need a resolution calling for them to take immediate action, again, on temporary bus lanes, temporary bike lanes. And then another part of that is the longer term embracing the RPA's plan for making New York City more bike friendly, and embracing the vision that the New York Times article called for of what would the city look like if there was a ban on private cars, which can...
Wasn't this agenda item supposed to be about getting people...
Right, got back on the subway.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. I proposed this, and the language that I had proposed was actions for New York City DOT given community concerns about riding subways. Somehow that morphed into what's on the website now, which is discussion of ways to address community concerns about riding subways, which is still the same issue, that there are concerns, but the
you seem to think people are more comfortable, and I've heard some people are more comfortable riding a bus, but a bus only holds, maybe 80 or fewer people, where a subway can hold hundreds. So you can technically be further from your nearest neighbor on a subway than you can on a bus.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also look at alternatives, and if there might be more capacity. It's really, overall, it's a question of capacity. And no matter what, there's no way we can replicate the capacity of the subways by any other means.
No,
but if we
can't.
try doing that with cars, the city is going to completely shut down. Buses won't be able to get anywhere. It'll be a complete nightmare. And it's already happening. I wrote an email to the group. My colleague had a dinner where she invited her daughter's friend from Brooklyn. Instead of the daughter's friend taking the subway there and back, she drove to Brooklyn to get her, drove back, and then at the end of the dinner, drove her back to Brooklyn back. If we have that for every ride where people take a private car instead of the subway, we're going to have absolute complete shutdown of the city. It's not possible.
No, we can't have that. But ridership is growing on a daily basis and a weekly basis. So I think people are starting, as they hear from their friends or colleagues or office workers that, hey, I took the train and it was cleaner than I've ever seen it. I think this is spreading around and people are feeling more comfortable. I've noticed it. I think Susan Schwartz has noticed it because she rides frequently. And I've talked to her about it. So
even if 10% of people aren't comfortable and those people go to cars, the city shuts down.
Okay, but let me just ask Andrew, is there something that you would like to see the committee adopt in a resolution? You know the subway is better than any of us. I heard a line recently, the more driving, the less movement. That was a very quick way of putting it.
Yeah,
So-
that's very good. I think somebody's suggestion of having a resolution to the mayor, the governor, with a copy to Chair Foy of the MTA, suggesting that both the city, the state, and the MTA itself start doing PR promotions for getting people back on mass transit, because it's good for everyone. It's good for the economy. It's good for our air. And it's good for motorists because they'll have more room on the road. It's good for everybody. And I think, a resolution to that effect, I think, is apple pie.
Okay, but you're not hearing me. I think we also need a resolution to the DOT calling for alternatives for the streets, given that there's going to be a sizable population, no matter what we do. And I think, again, we should do everything possible to get more people on public transportation. But to the extent we have a decent portion of the population that's not going on public transportation, we're at risk of the city completely shutting down if everyone goes out and gets a car and tries to drive everywhere.
I think we all pretty much agree about that. It's just a question of how do we stop it?
Well, do we pass a resolution calling on DOT to make it as tempting as possible for people to take bikes or buses?
Well, yes, we have a full board resolution calling for an immediate implementation of a connected bike network. So definitely we've done that.
And we're on record for
obviously it hasn't happened, but
lanes
yes.
too.
Yep. So we've done that. Andrew, do you want to restate your resolution and then we can vote on it?
I believe it was CV7 understands the importance of mass transit and to the city's economy and air quality. And we therefore urge the mayor, the governor, and the MTA to do everything they can to promote the use of mass transit, declaring how safe it is, how service is back to normal levels, and you will not recognize the system because it has been cleaned several times every day. Just words to that effect.
I'll gladly second that. Do you want to vote? Mark, are you still on? You have a lot of experience with doing this voting. Would you mind?
I'm muted. Okay, here I am.
There
Okay,
you
so
are.
let's call, sounds like we're ready to call the question. Committee members first. All those in favor, if you can virtually raise your hand, please do so. And if you can't, then put your hand up physically. So I have 8 virtual hands. I have Howard is 9 and Andrew is 10. And I don't see any other hands. Roberta is not voting, however. So I have, well, whoops, I have 10. 10 altogether. Let's lower those hands. Okay, anybody opposed? I don't see anybody. Anybody abstaining? And there's no one for cause. Unless I hear Roberta, the vote is 10 to 0 to 0 to 0. Non-committee board members in favor, please raise your hand now. Shelley and, so I have Seema and Susan is 2. Shelley and me is 4.
And Paul Fisher.
And Paul Fisher is 5. I'll accept that vote. So 5. Hands down now, please. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? And anybody not eligible? So it looks like 5 to 0 to 0 to 0 in the non-committee board members. That work?
Great.
And I'm sure we'll be discussing some of these other issues at our meetings in the fall.
I vote.
Our next item is there anything we need to do on the district statement?
And to the restaurant community.
There's something, somebody's not
Somebody
muted.
needs to mute themselves.
Yeah.
That's Roberta.
I vote for it.
Roberta, did you say you voted for that? Oh, now she's muted.
Sorry
Oh,
about that. My battery's low. I vote yes.
Okay, so it's 11 to 0 to 0 to 0.
Thank you.
Roberta's on the committee.
Anything we need to do on the district needs statement, Mark?
Well, you need to do the district needs statement. The suggestion, you've got the memo from the budget committee that recommends that you take a fresh look. I would encourage you to include in that fresh look issues that have come up with respect to COVID. And you guys have passed resolutions and otherwise taken actions that are in direct response to that. So the thing that I would encourage you to do is to make sure that your district narrative, your portion of the narrative, reflects both what you have done and the lessons learned that maybe have defied a solution, or at least to date had defied a solution. That includes some of the things that you were talking about here tonight. So I would recommend that you try to put those together first as a matter of bullet points, and then if you need the budget committee to help flesh that out into a statement, then we can help you do that too.
Andrew and I can just talk about that offline. Do you have anything else to say on that, Andrew?
No. Mark, when was that budget thing sent to us? Do you recall when it was sent out?
Late May, early June.
Okay.
I'll be glad to. Cindy will, I'm sure, be glad to resend it.
I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you. So Andrew and I we'll talk offline about that. An update on committee discussions.
Before you do that, Howard, Shelley asked if we'd reconsider and maybe revote or reaffirm to DOT our earlier resolution about a mid-block crossing on 106th Street between Columbus and Amsterdam. Many seniors are need to cross there. They can't walk all the way. That's a very long block, and it is raised in the center, so motorists cannot see people who might be crossing in advance. And that mid-block crossing is a no-brainer. It's a push-button request to temporarily close the light and allow pedestrians to go from the two senior centers right up virtually across the street from each other. So we didn't ask that we would consider. Shelley, go ahead. You want to add something?
Serves hundreds of people every week. People have gotten hurt crossing. We invited DOT, Penny arranged it. They interviewed people who had been hurt. They saw the site. We got dozens of letters from residents who use the centers asking for it. We had letters from Westside Federation that owns the building, from the senior center, from Jewish Home Day Center. The board this transportation committee approved it over 2 years ago. The board, I think, unanimously approved it. So I'd like to encourage us to, at least in a letter, reaffirm, but or reissue our resolution, because nothing has changed, unfortunately.
Yes, we can send a letter. We've already done a resolution. I do recall Colleen telling us that, well, DOT didn't think it merited a mid-block crossing there. The fact that you tell me now that people have been injured, if that doesn't cause them to reconsider that decision, I don't know what will, but we should send a letter, and we will.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you, Shelley. And the two institutions could also send a letter. That would be helpful, I think.
Sure, do it again.
Great.
That is an update on old business. Do we have Colleen on the line? I guess not, which means we will not be getting a few of the updates that I was hoping for.
Yeah, I think she told us she couldn't make this meeting.
Does anyone else have any other old business that they'd like to bring up again?
Yeah, I had something.
Ken?
It has to do with the open streets. And on West End Avenue, 102nd Street, 75th Street, I think it is. I think they've been doing their job, more than doing their job. I sense that the one on West End Avenue is extremely popular among a lot of people are using it. I don't know what the time limit is. Mark, do we know, is there any endpoint that DOT has set?
I'm not aware of one. because that's an open street, not a restaurant open street.
Right.
And I believe that those are different. So no, I don't have anything for you on that.
Uh-huh. I think we should consider a call to make them permanent and even expand some of the cross street open streets.
Actually, I would be opposed to making West End permanent. That is a major route to the Henry Hudson Parkway, and it's causing very unsafe conditions on other northbound routes because of people can't use West End now. And I don't think West End would be a smart choice for all the time. I really don't.
Well, it certainly made West End a lot safer.
And there's a lot fewer cars right now, but when there's a lot of cars, oh my God.
Well, that's one way you get fewer cars, is to
And you know
make
what
it
else
a
it means,
little less
Ken?
convenient to drive.
We haven't gotten those improvements that we requested, and we did a walking tour of off the Henry Hudson Parkway at 95th and 97th Street. Remember all of that walking tour we did up there? And DOT has not yet done what we have asked them to do. So to put additional traffic at 96th and Riverside, or actually Riverside you're over Riverside there, so it's not the best choice. Right now it's working because there's fewer cars.
Well, that's very debatable, but I'm not sure we should have that debate right now.
No.
But I would like to have it at some point.
But let's at least find out how long these open streets are scheduled to be open, so to speak.
That would be good.
Yeah,
that's a good starting point. And again, we could have a discussion in the fall about which streets would be most appropriate to consider having open for longer. We have Lisa Orman has her hand raised.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I see that Rich just put it in the chat as well. I just wanted to point out that NACDO and others are talking about school streets. So spaces around schools where sidewalks and streets can be used for instruction. And I think there was a Daily News or some article recently that I can also put in the chat about this. I wondered, given that you aren't meeting again until September, how we can move this issue forward if it's something that the community board is interested in discussing.
This sounds like a perfect topic for one of our walking tours.
Pardon me?
This sounds like a perfect topic for one of our committee walking tours.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we obviously have schools kind of everywhere on the Upper West Side, but I think that if we can, I think that's a great idea to do a walking tour and just see what space is available and could be used, and how to move that forward, because school is going to start in September. So we need a plan.
The thing that you want to do on your walking tour, by the way, is assess what other businesses are on these streets that you're proposing to close for these purposes. Because we have already, this committee has had a long experience and history with trying to get the DOT to do plate streets and other uses on streets that have either a parking garage or a storage facility or a warehouse, and they are and a methadone clinic, none of which they apparently will contemplate a closed street for. So that I'm not saying that should be the result, but certainly that's the battle you're going to pick to fight if you move down in that direction.
I think just like with everything else, unfortunately, the DOT and the city has had to be very creative, and I hope that they'll be creative in this way too. So I understand that that was previously the case, but maybe because of these circumstances, they'll be more open to solutions for schools. And I don't know how the DOE feels about it either. I don't know if any of you know that. Yeah, so I think just finding out more and seeing how you guys feel and seeing if this is something that our community would want is important.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think we'll look into it.
Yeah, it's important because the schools, it's just a mess, and that's the technical term for what's going on. And I think they're going to have to figure out ways to accommodate students, and they may, street space in the fall may be something that could be useful to them. I don't think it's really our committee's ability to initiate something like this. But if the schools or YEL has some ideas, we're certainly receptive, because that's one of the highest priorities for public spaces, to educate kids. So,
can I just add something? Because we had a school leadership team meeting for PS 166 this morning. And I mean, the school needs to make their plans basically right now for how they're going to be, staggering who's coming in and what times and what days. And in order to make those choices, they need to be able to decide how many kids they can have in school each day, decide whether they need to have 2 cohorts or 3 cohorts, depending on how much space they have, basically. So they need to know how much space they have available. So I do think that if this is something that CB7 is interested in supporting in any way, it's something we need to at least have something on pretty imminently. I mean, I'll just raise that because they have to report, the schools have to report to the DOE. I can't remember the exact date, but it's within a week or 2 on their plans for how they're going to do their schedule. And that's
Sarah, do you happen to know if parents will have child and their parents will have the option of remote learning, or they must attend? Because some places will have options.
And any family will have the option to do all remote learning.
Okay,
yes.
so how late do parents have to get back to the schools to let them know my child will be learning?
Yeah, there's going to be an opt-in time, but it's all, I mean, to Howard's point that I think technical term is a mess for what it is right now, because the school has to decide how they're going to use their space, but they have to know how many kids are going to be coming back to make that decision. Right. But a lot of parents don't necessarily want to make that decision for their family until they know what the schedule is going to look like and what the schooling is going to look like. So
that is a catch-22.
Julian, yeah, it is. It really is.
Looks like Julian has some more information on that.
Just to give some insights into the dates, schools have to submit their preliminary plans for what they want by around the 23rd. And then families have to choose if they want to opt into full remote learning by the 7th. And then the final plan for the school is chosen by the 14th and approved by the 21st. So we're basically talking about is families have to choose whether they want to go into remote learning full time before the final plan is approved. And the final plan is approved in late August. So if the community board wanted to do something about that, discussing this at our committee meetings in September wouldn't necessarily be the best place to do that, because by then the school year would already have started and the plans for reopening would have already been approved.
If they're going to be using streets, they're going to be doing that in the fall. They're not going to be doing that.
Yeah.
As the temperature drops, obviously it's something that they'd be wanting to do in September.
Have you spoken about this with our youth committee at all?
No.
We should be in touch with them to see what they know about this and if they would like to jointly look into space for schools. But
Andrew, I just put this in chat, but I was just wondering if it would be worth, I guess it may not matter. I mean, it should matter, but for the YEL July meeting, asking the co-chairs if maybe we could add an agenda item to their meeting. So I think.
Makes sense.
Mark, when that's what, next Thursday?
No, it's the day after tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So
not a lot of notice. Sounds like new business. Sounds like new business, but not something that they can actually take an action on.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Well, an action wouldn't even matter because we wouldn't be able to have a full board vote.
Right.
Also correct. Yeah, we're kind of already in that twilight zone.
But to go out on a limb here, it's not as if our community board controls the use of the streets. We're just giving moral support to the Board of Ed or
DOT.
The DOT to support this use of the streets. So a resolution from the Transportation Committee could be something that they cite in support of that if we wanted to do that this evening. Again, it's not as useful as a full board recommendation, but it's something that we could be on record as being in favor of. The resolution that I would propose is that the DOT make available street space for schools to the extent they could do it safely and without unduly impairing other uses. That's off the top of my head. What do people
Howard,
think?
could we do that? Could we do that with the YEL committee on Thursday? It's going to carry the same weight, and that way it has 2 committees attached to it.
And just be new business there, right? Because it hasn't been noticed.
I mean, this is new business tonight. This is not.
That's true. So it would be new business. Yeah.
Why can't we just vote on it here and then let them know that we did it and they can vote on it themselves?
I think because it doesn't carry the same weight as if we do it together with another committee.
Well, if both committees do it, it's the same. They do it together or they do it separately. It's the net result is the same.
We haven't actually consulted with them in any way, though.
Yeah, and you know, this is, I mean, it is a use of the streets, but it is a youth-centered,
It is
youth-focused.
very much so.
Yeah, so I would agree
I
that.
don't want to step on toes, especially if we can get it done in 2 days.
Well, it is a discussion that you'd want them to lead, because while you guys are the experts on the streets, they're the experts on the schools, and so
Exactly.
yeah, it would be best if there could be some collaboration on that. And you know, if it's worded broadly enough, I imagine we could find a resolution somewhere that we could write a letter on without needing a full board vote, as long as we're not getting granular about make 107th Street this or that.
Has DOE already said what capacity of their existing space they will be utilizing for in-person teaching?
I haven't heard that. Julian, what have you heard?
So they sent in DOE people to individual schools, and they actually measured the dimensions of every single classroom, every single school, and created these space studies that developed reports on how many students can you fit in the classroom with social distancing.
We have
the
bigger
averages
schools.
between
Yeah.
Well,
like
to
10
answer
to
Andrew's question, they're using 100%. Even the gyms and any extra space they're going to use for classrooms.
Yeah, to give you an
The
example
question
of
is just how much they can fit into that space when people are social distanced.
Right.
to give an example of numbers, my school normally has 3,400 kids in it. With social distancing, it will only be able to fit 802 kids in it at once. So that's like 4 times less. So we're gonna need a lot of cohorts. So it's basically looking like schools are gonna be significantly limited, even if they use gym spaces and all that. So having extra outdoor space would be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, and we should be talking about it with the youth committee. However, just to use an example, when we get into the bad weather, who's going to want to be out in the street, right? If it's pouring or if it's snowing, or I mean, we just have to we have to see which schools have more space than others, and hope that we have this vaccine that they're talking about by the end of the year. That would be fabulous. But
I think what we did at our SLT meeting this morning, or well, we did it actually right when all of this started, but we set for ourselves that we were going to be that our guiding rules would be that we have to be flexible and adaptable. And I think that is just going to be true for every school going forward and for businesses and all of these things. Of course, we don't know, and we don't know what the weather's going to do and whatever else, but we just have to be flexible and adaptable.
And I just wanted to add to that point, to Sarah's point, I think being flexible is a really good idea. I also think maybe if we could talk to YAL and suggest that, or even to the DOE, that schools could have extended hours. So to Julian's point that, you can only fit 802 students at once, you have a cohorts that come in the morning and another one that comes.
Yeah, a couple of shifts.
Yeah,
right.
So they stay till 6 or even 7. And
That's,
I think
that's already ended discussion.
The problem is the teachers.
Yeah.
Right. So I think maybe to some
The
degree
union.
it could be substitute teachers, or might not be the best idea. They also record their lectures in Zoom, so the afternoon class, and it would just have to change. We got to think of every single idea on offering every student the same education. To some degree.
It's all on the table, I would say.
To Andrew's point about cold weather, if the gyms are being used for classrooms, then the streets could be used for outdoor recreational space. So even if you don't want to teach a classroom in a street when it's cold, it could be an option, especially if the weather's not horrendous, for people to at least get outside and for kids to be able to run around a little bit.
I think
still are uses for.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure they're going to be having much recreational time. The kids are, for the most part, the plan is not even to leave, the classrooms. You don't want kids in the hallways kind of bumping into each other and stuff. So instead of going from the classroom to, a theater room or whatever, not only because the theater room is going to be being used for classes, but also just because they're going to basically keep the cohort of kids that is together. And that's it, basically. It's going to be a very different experience for children.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen.
Sorry, it doesn't sound like Doesn't sound like there's something to vote on this tonight. Peter Ernst had his hand up and then it went away. I'm not sure if there was something you wanted to add.
Peter, you around? I see the hand up, but I don't see.
Said he had to police on us.
Peter, you can unmute yourself.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just got, I had to deal with the 911 situation. I wanted to call your attention to that we have requested open streets up here for 3 side streets, 107th, 104, and 99th Street. We just sent in an application to close down Amsterdam Avenue from 97th to 110th on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoons and evenings. And I'd welcome comments on that, but basically it's through the Open Streets restaurants for the second one. And last point is that we will be having our annual meeting on the 30th, Thursday the 30th at 5 p.m. if anybody's interested in coming to it. So that's my comment.
I have a comment, Peter.
Yes.
You know that's a bus street, right?
Tough.
It's not, they won't do it on bus streets. They said
They may.
And where does the bus go?
We went from having a 15-foot emergency lane to I've offered them 22 feet. They're considering it.
Well, the bus has to get through.
Yep, that's what I mean. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so the idea would be to have 5-mile-an-hour speeds and to have 2 lanes available for emergency vehicles and buses.
Keep us posted on that, will you?
Yeah, keep us posted.
It's a long shot, Andrew, and there's lots of problems, but we've got lots of
when you mentioned the cross streets, Peter, from where to where?
99th is Broadway to Amsterdam, 107th is Broadway to Amsterdam, 104th is Amsterdam to Columbus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Put in back in May, and it's still sitting in DOT. The other one put on last week, and I've had conversations.
This is dirty and that's food.
Yep.
No, I'm on.
Yeah, keep us posted, Peter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other outstanding business that people want to discuss? We could also talk about future agenda items. I think a bunch of them came out of this meeting that'll be in our, we'll consider for our September meeting. Any other comments, thoughts, criticisms? Hearing none, I guess we will adjourn for the summer.
Thank you all. Great job.
Thank you, everyone.
So are we agreeing that we're going to discuss Revel and motorcycles, and what are the future agenda items that we came out?
We'll have to work on that. You know, the people brought up Revel, Ken brought up SUVs. There are a lot of unsafe vehicles on the streets, and Andrew and I will come up with an agenda item, and we'll get to discuss them all.
Howard, I would also add the vision coming out of the New York Times article.
That's a good one too. And in case people haven't seen it, it's well worth reading. It's where I got that line, the more we drive, the less we move. Anything else?
Are we resolving that some of us will be at YEL on Thursday night?
Somebody needs to give YEL a heads up that if that's going to be the case.
I can certainly do that.
That would be great.
Who can make it? I can make it.
I cannot make it. I also want to emphatically tell people if you have ideas or items for the agenda, definitely email either Andrew or the best is to both Andrew and me. Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
One is I put it in chat and Mark responded, but since we have a resolution calling for an interim temporary network of protected bike lanes using temporary emergency infrastructure as necessary, we should do a letter reinforcing that since it hasn't happened. And it's going to become more essential just as things return more to normal.
Well, the crisis ain't over, so I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And the second is if we are
a few months ago. Yes, I agree. A letter should be done to remind them.
The second is if we are bringing up YEL, or if we're raising open streets with YEL on Thursday, even if it's not sufficient notice, we should get word out as much as we can just so people know about it. through social media or however else we might be able to do.
Good idea.
Do my best.
Great.
Julian's my maven on that, and he's left the call, so.
Yeah.
A meeting.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the summer. As they say, I'll see you in September.
Thank you all.